Our next speaker is James Walsh, former Associate General Counsel of the Immigration Naturalization Service.
Immigration is the movement of people or persons from one country to the other. In the United States, immigration is in a state of anarchy. Not chaos, but anarchy. We're here today to talk about numbers. As in the past, in the book that was given out, the pamphlet, counting the uncountable. First of all, you must understand my background. I'm not a statistician, I'm not an economist, I'm not a demographer, I'm not a social worker. I'm a lawyer. I'm a courtroom lawyer. I try cases. I've tried cases all my life, my professional occupation. I was an assistant U.S. attorney. I was a special trial attorney with the Organized Crime Section of the Department of Justice. I handled antitrust cases, and then I was recruited to INS in 1983. Why? Because at that time, of the 300 lawyers there, none of them had any federal trial experience dealing with either criminal or civil matters. They only had immigration experience. And then before immigration judges or before the Court of Immigration Appeal. And,
you can move it if you need to.
Or the Department of Justice at that time, through the Office of Immigration Litigation, handled the appeals to the federal circuit courts. And obviously the Solicitor General handled the appeals of the certiorari to the Supreme Court. What is the problem with immigration and the numbers? As I say, I have my numbers. Mr. Passell from the Pew organization has his numbers. Census Bureau has their numbers. Everybody has their numbers. Mine are estimates just like theirs. Nobody has a distinct, defined number on illegal aliens in the United States. That is tragic. That is unacceptable. The United States, from its founding days, is a nation of laws. You hear that all the time. In determining illegal aliens, the Congress of the United States, the House and the Senate, passed the Immigration Naturalization Act. At that time it was known as the McCarran-Walter Act in 1952-1954. That's the INA. That's the basis of all the subsequent legislation. In 1965, they passed what was known as the Hart-Celler Immigration Act. Then, the greatest of all, what was known as the Simpson-Mazzoli legislation bill in 1986, which granted amnesty and put in employer sanctions. There's a thread through all this legislation. One of the threads is Senator Edward Moore Kennedy, Democrat of Massachusetts. Senator Kennedy was the floor leader in the Senate in 1965, the passage of the Hart-Celler immigration bill that provided and changed the INA to provide for more and unrestricted immigration from the third world. In 1986, with amnesty in IRCA, the floodgates opened. There are a number of reasons. A lot of you may remember, some of you may be too young to remember, the civil strife in El Salvador and Nicaragua. That gave rise to the sanctuary movement of the 80s. We're here to talk about numbers, but you must understand the genesis. You must understand, you must have a foundation. Just like in an antitrust case, you must know the methodology of the documentation, the background of the documentation that is going to be presented in court. You can't do it in isolation. with reference to the numbers became gigantic. The tsunami that resulted from the 1986 legislation of illegal aliens coming into the United States. I look at the numbers as a trial lawyer, as a litigator. I look at it as a person who thinks, how am I going to prove to a jury, if it's a jury trial? How am I going to prove to a judge, if it's a non-jury trial, my case? Again, I emphasize I'm not a statistician or an economist, all due respect to Dr. Romeo. You remember the words of Harry S. Truman about an economist. He wanted a one-armed economist. Why? Because economists were telling him at that time, on the one hand, President Truman, you have this. On the other hand, you have that. Well, if you know any of the history of President Truman, who was castigated at the time, he was a very certain gentleman who wanted his figures exact. He did not want this wishy-washy estimates, guesswork. Well, that's what we have today, and I don't want to digress. We have guesswork on the number of illegal aliens. With the understanding that the wave of illegal aliens started in the 1980s and has considerably risen since that time, we go to how many are coming in. Now, this is where everybody gets into their own numbers. While I was the Associate General Counsel of INS, I had occasion to travel quite extensively to the southern border, from Brownsville to San Ysidro, on I would almost say monthly time. I traveled from Presque Isle, Maine, to Blaine, Washington on the northern border, including such places as the Windsor Bridge in Detroit. These are major crossing points into the United States. Unlike some of my contemporaries and some of my critics, I spent time on the border. Better part of a week, a month for 11 and a quarter years, excuse me. I'm familiar enough to be able to drive in every city in the states of California, New Mexico, Arizona, Texas. With that, you must understand my experience talking to and teaching. I also taught at the various government training facilities. And as I pointed out in the article, I believe that you have copies of, I taught the Border Patrol agents, both the incoming new agents and the journeyman agents. Journeymen were agents that were 5 years or more in the position. Ladies and gentlemen, they're the front line. Regardless of what you may think, regardless of your opinion, regardless of the numbers that have gone, the frontline people know what's going on. From 1983 to 1994, and then from 1996 to 2004, agents have told me that I had known personally over the years that the numbers vary, but as to how many apprehensions they have on the border officially. And the average comes down to 1.1 million from 1987 through 2006. That's an average. Obviously, there were dips sometimes to 900,000, sometimes to 1.5 million, or 1.4 million. Now, those are figures that are underlying figures that if you were trying an antitrust case or trying a criminal case, the court would have to accept. Each one of those agents, and I've talked to hundreds of them, I still talk to some of them, still maintain that conservatively, the most conservative view is that 3 Illegal aliens come into the United States for every one apprehension.